Hi and welcome to this video covering the structure and function of the heart. So we are going to be looking at the circulatory system. What is that? Well, it's the process in which the heart pumps the blood to and from the cells of the body. It also transports nutrients, hormones and other gases, as I said, to and from the cells of the body. So it is a muscular pump that's located between the two lungs, slightly to the left behind the sternum. And it's around the size of a human fist. It beats around 70 times per minute on average, so that's around 100,000 times per day. So let's go through some of the information that we've got in front of us here. So when we're looking at the cardiovascular system, what does it include? Well, obviously we've got the heart, the muscle. We've got blood vessels, which include veins, capillaries and arteries. And we've got blood, the transportation system. What does it do? We've already said that. It transports it transports the oxygen and the nutrients, and it removes waste. Obviously our body needs oxygen that we breathe in through the respiratory system. It gets into our blood, it's transported to the cells of the body, where it is diffused into the cells, we use it, and then it creates that waste product, which is carbon dioxide, and that removes the waste, so the carbon dioxide. Now it's made up of myocardium, which are thick muscular walls, wrapped in a layered sac of pericardium. It's actually split, as you can see here, into two halves. We've got the right half, which is smaller and takes the blood to the lungs, and we've got the left half, which is larger, and that's to the body. Now, an important point here, that when you're actually looking at this on your screen, you're probably looking at left and right, but we need to flip that around. You need to assume that somebody is actually facing you, all right? So this would be the right side, and this would be the left side. If you can imagine, I'm facing you straight on, all right? So as I said, the right side is smaller, and it's to the lungs, whereas the left side is larger, and it's larger because it's pumping, it takes more force to get the blood to the body. Each side is hollow and it's divided into two chambers. All right, we've got the atrium, which are the top. All right, atrium. So that's the left atrium, that's the right atrium. And then we've got the ventricles. Right ventricle and left ventricle. Okay, when it comes to the atrium, atriums receive blood, so they're a collection chamber, all right? It pumps into the ventricles, and they have thin walls, all right? They're much smaller than the ventricle. Now, this example is a simpler way of looking at the heart. I'll explain that in a little while, but ultimately what you need to know here, for the atrium, receives blood, pumps to ventricles, it has thinner walls, and it's the smaller part, all right, the smaller chambers. When we move over to the ventricles, all right, they obviously receive blood from the atriums, from the atria, all right, and these generate the force. They generate the force to get the blood out through the aorta to the rest of the body. So obviously they have thicker walls and they're much, much larger. One final point before we go into more detail here is this, valves. So these are valves here, all right? They have different names. Again, for level 2 gym instructing, it's not something that you really need to know at this stage, the names of them. What you do need to know is what they're for. And ultimately, as it says here, valves prevent backflow of blood, all right? We want blood flowing in one direction. The valves will open to allow blood to go through, and then they'll close to stop blood from coming back, all right? This is a key point. Valves, they prevent backflow of blood. Okay, so let's talk about how blood travels through the heart. And to start, I think a good starting place would be, let's say we've just done a bicep curl. The blood and the oxygen has been pumped into our biceps to work. It's taken all the oxygen out, or not all the oxygen, but it's taken the oxygen that it needs out. And the waste product is the CO2 that we spoke about earlier, the carbon dioxide, and we need to get that out of our body. So how do we do that? Well, obviously we need to get it into our respiratory system to breathe out, but it needs to come through the circulatory system, and it does that in the blood. It'll make its way up the largest vein in the body, which is called the vena cava. And that's then where it enters the heart. It enters the heart and it collects in this right atrium. All right, remember these are a collecting chamber. The blue, so this is deoxygenated blood, all right? It's not oxygen rich. What happens then? There is a squeeze here, a contraction, and the blood is forced through this valve here. The valve opens and it enters the right ventricle. All right, enters the right ventricle. Again, the blue, deoxygenated blood. The right ventricle will contract and the blood makes its way through this valve. This is the pulmonary valve, and it makes its way into the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery. All right, what it's doing then, it's taking this deoxygenated blood up to the lungs. Obviously, goes without saying, this is not to scale. All right. When it's in the lung, the diffusion takes place. All right, we breathe. We'll go into the detail of that in another video covering the respiratory process. But what's happening there as we breathe? We're exhaling the CO2. We're inhaling the oxygen that we need, and the blood then becomes oxygenated. And that's shown here as the red arrows. All right. When it leaves the lungs, it's heading into what's called the pulmonary vein. All right. And it's making its way to the other collection chamber, this time on the left-hand side of the heart. This oxygen-rich blood goes into the left atrium. All right, it's collecting there. There's a contraction. Goes through this valve here, which is the mitral valve. Again, don't worry too much about the names yet. Into the left ventricle. All right, from here, we need to get this oxygenated blood to the body. There's an almighty contraction. It makes its way through this aortic valve into the aorta, which is the largest artery of the body. It's going to take it up to the higher extremities of the body, down to the lower extremities of the body to be used by the cells of your body. And that's basically it. It really is that simple. Let me just go through it again rather quickly. So we've got the oxygen-rich blood. It makes its way to the part of the body, the cell of the body that needs the oxygen. All right, it diffuses with that part of the body, that cell. The oxygen is taken out. It's used by that part of the body, that cell, whatever that may be, muscle contraction, whatever. When that has been used, it creates the waste product, carbon dioxide. We need to get that out of our body. All right. It makes its way back through the venules, the veins, into the vena cava. Obviously then, as we see here, it's deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. It makes its way through the valve, into the right ventricle, through the valve again, into the pulmonary artery, heading its way to the lungs. In the lungs, the diffusion process is going to happen. We're going to release that carbon dioxide. We're going to take in the oxygen that we need. It goes into to oxygenated blood into the pulmonary vein, makes its way into the left atrium, through the valve to the left ventricle. Almighty contraction because we need that force to get it to the different parts of the body. It goes through the aortic valve into the aorta, which I didn't write. All right, cool. And that's it. That's what you need to know. If you can explain this very simple piece of information in front of you, then you know the information that's required for the level 2 gym instructing qualification, all right, regarding the structure and function of the heart. A few things to point out before we finish. I mean, we're gonna cover blood vessels in another video, but just quickly in terms of the blood vessels, the main ones, we've obviously got the veins and we've got the arteries. All right, the aorta is an artery as well. The vena cava is a vein. In fact, let me make that a little bit more clear. I'm going to put that blue because obviously deoxygenated blood. Now, on the most, all but one actually, all of the arteries but one in the body, they collect and transport oxygenated blood. Whereas the veins transport deoxygenated blood. So a good way to think about this is vein, in. Vein, the in section, it's taking deoxygenated blood back into the heart. Whereas arteries, would help if I use the right pen, wouldn't it? Arteries is out. It's taking oxygenated blood. Now there is only one difference, one artery and one vein in the whole body that changes that. As I said, arteries is oxygenated. The only artery of the body that carries deoxygenated blood is this pulmonary artery that goes from the right ventricle into the lungs. Veins, all but one, carry deoxygenated blood. The exception is the pulmonary vein, which carries, as you can see here, oxygenated blood. So you might get asked questions in your exam or when your tutors or assessors are questioning you on this. Where does deoxygenated blood start in the heart? Where does it enter the heart? And the real simple answer, deoxygenated blood enters the heart through the right atrium from the vena cava, and it makes its way into the right ventricle through the pulmonary artery into the lungs. What I would recommend, something that I did, something that I know our tutors did, is just take the time to go through this, all right? There will be a download, so take the time, go through each section individually. When you can discuss this like I've just done then you're aware, you know all the information that's required. It really is straightforward, all right? None of this showing the complicated heart. Yeah, it looks very complicated, but then when you break it down like this, it makes it super easy to understand. If you've got any questions or comments, pop them in the comments below, all right? Please do also subscribe and like on YouTube. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.